In 7, Episode 10, The Phantom Apprentice. Who do you think the Phantom Apprentice refers to? Maul, Anakin, or Ahsoka? My thought, I'll give it a vacuum. All three. Maul is obviously the apprentice from Episode 1, most obvious example. But Anakin has always been the apprentice of Palpatine for years upon years. And of course, then we have the apprentice who wasn't even in the films, invented solely for the Clone Wars series. I love how they jump right into it. You can really tell this was edited to be a single, contiguous work. And I know I've kind of said that about each of these, but no, I mean, each of these have still had a little bit of a previously on, and then they jump into it. But no, it just jumps right into it, as if zero time has passed from the previous episode. Yeah, this is a film, I'm sorry. We are effectively covering a film at this point, and I'm here for it. Maul sounds so on its... God, I love what Sam Witwer does with the role here. And everything he says makes absolutely perfect sense, but only with the advantage of context. It's so easy to look at Maul and say, yeah, no, why aren't you listening to him? Put yourself into the mindset of the other people for just a moment. Really think about the perspective of Ahsoka. Certainly there's been some things going wrong, but like, the war's ending, you know? They've won. The Clone Wars are winding down. Things are moving forwards, right? Like, everything is progressing and in such a way, and she's starting to move on with her own life, and you know, Anakin's kind of progressing through his thing, and everything's going good. Everything seems to be leaning towards that wonderful, finally we made it kind of a moment. And yeah, this is Maul, who was a Sith Lord, who generations of valid propaganda, I hate to use that word, teachings, have taught us not to listen to. But listen to what he actually says. Your way of thinking is outdated. The moment may finally be upon us. Soon the Jedi and Republic will no longer be the controlling interest in the galaxy. Everything he says is quite accurate. He's so right. And it sucks. Really quick, thank you, Ross. As always, much appreciate. If you know what you want to put that towards, do please let me know. Or be destroyed. So, and this is something Rax pointed out. I have to point this out. This is such great voice direction. He doesn't say Darth Sidious. He says Darth and catches it. And you can audibly hear, like, there's this moment where his throat catches. You couldn't hear it right now because of how I have my mic set up. But if I was doing voice acting, you could hear me do this right there as the throat catches on itself for just a second before Sidious. Such a quiet, subtle detail, but it does so much to emphasize just how much he is absolutely terrified of Palpatine. And he should be. This whole series has been giving me a lot to think about when it comes to Star Wars Rewrite, as absolutely weird as that probably sounds. What genre is this game, Ross? These do not help indicate. Palpatine is such a black hole at the center of Star Wars. He's this blotch that covers everything around it. He's eldritch in more or less the traditional sense of the word. It's terrifying on so many levels. And again, we see Maul, who is powerful, who is competent, who is insane, crazed, violent, and indeed suicidal, and even Maul is just terrified of this thing. Yeah, Palpatine is what Vitier was always supposed to be. They just failed at. They did succeed a few times with Vitier. I'll give you that, back when he was calling himself Valkorion. One moment, if you'll forgive me an indulgence. See if I can find it. There it is. Maybe? Oh, god damn it. One moment. I'm sorry. There it is. Okay, I found it for real. Depowered lamp discs were rings of ghostly gray floating in the gloom. The shimmering jewelscape of Coruscant haloed the knife-edged shadow of the chair. This was the office of the Chancellor. Within the chair's shadow sat another shadow, deeper, darker, formless, impenetrable, an abyssal umbra so profound it drained light from the room around it, and from the city, and from the planet, and from the galaxy. The shadow waited. It had told the boy it would. It was looking forward to keeping its word. For a change. In all honesty, that's probably the best description of Palpatine I've ever read. It comes from the novelization of Episode 3, for those of you unaware. So, given his recent experience, and given there's this wonderful moment where Ahsoka goes to strike him, goes to attack him, and his response is, "Not yet." The moment he said that, it just clicked into place for me. He really does want to die. He wants to be over with this, to be done with this. But not yet. Not yet. He needs his one last little bit of satisfaction. One scrap, one morsel before he goes. He needs something before he lets go, before he accepts his fate. Shift over to the quiet thing. Love the pacing of this episode. Obi-Wan visibly hesitates before sharing any information about Sidious. Waves away everyone, but he does share. He shares it with Bo-Katan, with Rex, and with Ahsoka. They talk about Sidious, but they know so little. And this is some of the power of Palpatine in the prequel trilogy, more accurately in the Clone Wars. The very name Sidious was most of what they were able to learn. Even the Clone War books go into this, for those of you who have actually read those, about how much effort and time is spent on just trying to learn the identity of this man, and how much time and effort is spent to ensure that they never learn his identity, that they never even have something to start looking into him, that he is just such a boogeyman that they can't even begin to process who he is. And then, any chance of learning more about Sidious from Dooku is gone. So now we're past the Battle of Coruscant. And also, it's another little tidbit of something we talked about earlier with regards to Anakin, if you remember. The idea that there is a value in taking enemy leaders alive. Regardless of all of the more moral and ethical implications, there is a practical value in doing so as well. So, it is really fascinating to me. Obi-Wan then asks everyone else to leave. He's also on the verge. He's just mentioned he's being sent to Utpau. In fact, he's wearing the outfit he does when he goes. And Obi-Wan then confides very privately to Ahsoka about the fact that Anakin was attached to Palpatine. There's this wonderful back and forth, and Obi-Wan is starting to put some of the pieces together here. It's almost like he's being kept in a state of distraction, so he can't do anything about that, because he's on the verge of going to Utpau to deal with Grievous. So, there's this wonderful tidbit where Ahsoka's freaking out, like quietly, but she's still just like, oh my god, this is so ridiculous. Why would this has got to be tearing Anakin apart? And that's when Ahsoka says, Obi-Wan says, yeah, I need you to talk to Anakin. And her response is, why? So I can prove, so I can prove that that the council is right, so I can change his mind. Obi-Wan then hesitates for a moment and says, the council isn't always right. That's why I'm asking for your help. And that absolutely gets her attention. And then she's drawn away by Maul. It is fascinating how close, so close, Palpatine's plans here came to being screwed, because Ahsoka and Obi-Wan are both such spanners in the work for him. It is no wonder he spends so much effort trying to remove both of them from the board. There's a non-zero chance, we've talked about this before, there's a non-zero chance Ahsoka could have helped to save Anakin, could have helped turn him around. So, then there's this one wonderful little tidbit. I have to comment on this. As Ahsoka's leaving, she says, tell Anakin, and he says, I will. He never does. Then we see Then we see Jesse. You remember him, right? From the Pong Krell arc? I remember that because it's actually one of my favorite arcs in Clone Wars. But it's a powerful frickin' arc. And of course, Jesse is an interesting character to call back to, given all he went through in that particular episode. And of course, Maul, God, I have to praise Sam Witwer yet again. He is so good. He is so good. What plan are you talking about? The plan. The only plan that matters. I can thrive in the chaos that is to come. Now, if you're paying attention, that's a little bit different than the way he was talking earlier. And I mention this because this is important. He's no longer fully suicidal as of this moment, because now he knows who Ahsoka is. And he's like, okay. And like a desperate, terrified rat scrambling at a blank wall to escape the rising tide, he thinks he can do something now. So, okay, maybe I can manage this. Maybe I can do something here. Maybe I can make something of this. I can thrive in the chaos to come. They go to meet Almec, a leader they took alive. Huh. Almec lays out what I already mentioned. Maul's on a complete suicide run. But he also goes out of his way to share his knowledge. He knows who killed him. And he knows why he does this. And this is so critical because he specifically says, he's not after you. He's after Skywalker. That's not actually he says it, but that is what he says. And this is such a critical piece of the puzzle. Ahsoka chews on it because she doesn't have enough time to really process how important what she was just told was. Because let's logic this out for a second. Let's ignore our own knowledge about Star Wars. Put yourself in Ahsoka's shoes for a moment, okay? What does she know? Maul is terrified of someone called Darth Sidious. Legitimately terrified. It's been his driving force. He recently had a vision about this Sidious, and he went out of his way to lay an entire trap for the sole purpose of bringing someone named Skywalker to him. Those are some interesting puzzle pieces when put together. And so she starts to process. She starts to think about it. She's like, no, it's okay. If Anakin ever dies, Palpatine can fall back onto Darth Boulder. So then, I didn't have a chance to write down his name. Who was the crime lord villain in Solo? The guy played by Vision's actor, who's actually a great actor. I can't think of his name right now. Does anyone know his name? Denvik? Is that it? Dryden Voss? I think Dryden Voss. That's him. It is Dryden Voss. Was that Dryden Voss in the holo call? He calls the Pike, he calls some other guy, and he calls someone who looks a whole lot like Paul Bettany on the right. I just wanted to comment on that really quick because That is how you do proper fan service, in my opinion. Not the only way, of course, but a nice way to do that. Maul reaching out to him here and now is a nice little way to connect those threads quietly and in the background. They even mention he's calling the other crime lords to go to hiding, to go to ground. Okay, that makes sense. And then Maul rallies his troops with promises of glory and battle, immediately after telling the crime lords to go into hiding. Someone asked, I think it was Trehexia, why would the Death's Watch follow Maul? There's actually a lot of reasons here, most of which have real-life connotations. But it's very, very easy for people who want change, or a specific type of change, to follow a charismatic leader who says he knows exactly how to make things work for them. To make things the way you want them to be. To make them the way things you know they should be. If you're paying attention, Palpatine actually plays this similar trick, he just does it on a much grander scale and to much greater effect. But Maul, with conviction, says that he will ensure that they die in battle. And interestingly enough, he's not really lying. So, Maul is just sitting there, waiting for them, and not for the last time. Maul is weirdly amicable. Gives Jesse back, no strings attached, and just wants to talk. I say weirdly amicable because I would not call this man good or benevolent or anything like that, but this is not the last time Maul is willing to talk, to negotiate, to work with the other side, so to speak. And it makes sense considering how crazed and desperate he becomes over the course of his career. I do love some of his lines, though. One of you should go deal with that. Can I just say I really love Maul as a character. It's the single biggest reason why I've never actually begrudged them bringing him back after episode 1. Because while that's dumb, and it is, never has been anything other than dumb, I'm still very happy with what they did with Maul. And yeah, Maul, weirdly enough, learns to talk. It's such a fascinating thing. Anyways, so he has his one out. The one last possible option available to him that doesn't just involve him eating a lightsaber. And so he has a wonderful scene. I cannot do this scene justice. I cannot do this scene justice. We have such a fascinating duo here. We have Maul, who was cast aside by his master more than once. And then we have Ahsoka, who was rejected and dejected by the order she was she was raised by. Justice is merely a construct of the current power base, and that is about to change. And the way he talks about Sidious continues to be insane, but now Ahsoka's listening, because she's had a few puzzle pieces slotted into her knowledge base. And in the doing, she's starting to see a little bit more of the overall picture. Not all of it. She has no idea how bad things are. But she is starting to actually piece things together. And there's this wonderful bit where she reaches out to him. Join me. It's not too late. We can defeat Sidious together. And his response is, too late for what? I can't even emulate his acting. The Republic to fall? It already has! He sounds so despairing as he talks about how everything has already happened and we're past the point of stopping it. But maybe there's one option, one last desperate scrape of that wall before the water consumes him. And he reaches out a hand to Ahsoka. The juxtaposition of this pointless battle going on between Death's Watch and the Republic forces, pushed against Maul and Ahsoka, who are utterly unmoved by the chaos around them, is such a perfect encapsulation of these two characters. And it's one of the reasons why, for all of the mud that can be slung at both Maul and Ahsoka, I still love them, especially when they're done very, very well, which is this. These are two people who were birthed by the chaos of a war crafted for no reason other than to put one new person into power. Meaningless, pointless fighting, and endless death and destruction, and all of it was just one single move on a grand board. It's wonderful, the visual storytelling going on here. It's very Star Wars, and I would be remiss if I did not mention the music. I'll come back to the music in just a second. Well, yes, that's literally what I just said, Rex. That battle down there is pointless in universe. It was crafted by someone to serve as an escape vector and nothing more. It is someone throwing away lives because. And then there's this wonderful moment where Maul is extraordinarily honest. And he lays out everything. Here was my plan. Here was what was going to happen. Here's why it was going to happen. But unfortunately, he is extraordinarily honest here. He flat out says, we need to kill Anakin Skywalker, Sidious's apprentice. And Ahsoka can't believe it. She cannot believe what Anakin has become. Past tense. What Anakin already is. And everything has shown so clearly this truth. For all of us paying attention, for all of us with more of the picture at our disposal, for the audience, we see the bomb under the table. For all intents and purposes, Anakin is already several steps into being Darth Vader. Now, I do legitimately think it was possible for him to turn around at this point. I've said that before, and I'd say it again. But he is already on that path. But Ahsoka can't believe it. She can't deal with it, and so she does the only thing she can, and she rejects it. This close to joining Maul. I wonder what would have happened in such a world. God, I love the drums. I love the drums. I love the music. If I can do a strange sidebar for a second. I've been continuing the Trek lore run with the Trek lore runny, and we've been going through Voyager, and one of the biggest things that Rick Berman mandated for Voyager is what I usually refer to as wallpaper music. The wallpaper music is the idea that the music should be generic and in the background, that you shouldn't even notice it. And indeed, I know a lot of people who will watch Voyager who can't even process that the music is even there because it is so generic. Unfortunately, I'm too much of an audio designer and engineer to not notice it, and so it's distracting to me because it's terrible. This scene, this battle between Ahsoka and Maul and the people down below, is exactly why I love bespoke music, and why I posit the idea of music direction as being such an important and integral aspect of fiction, regardless of its medium. This is amazing, and it's crazy to think about how much work and effort was put into this shot. By the way, I also have to mention, god damn, can you just see Ray Park in those movements? If you've seen him, if you know his style, you can see it, right? You can see in the way he moves, in the way he fights. Little pro tip. I'm being sincere about this. If you ever want to know how good someone really is at some kind of martial arts thing, whether it's showy or actual, in other words, like choreography kind of a thing, watch their feet. I know. It's a lightsaber fight, and the eye is quite naturally drawn to the giant flashing things slashing into each other. But for real, do me a favor, watch their feet. Rewatch this scene, and look at that footwork. Those people know what they're freaking doing. The real people doing the motion capturing there is insanely good. Those people are crazy good. And I love it. And then, Saxon, I think his name was, calls in for help, and his response is, "Die well, Mandalorian. Yeah, you were always thrown away." Yeah, actually, yeah. Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor did a lot of really, really good footwork in their big duel in episode 3. Yeah, he does. Ray Park loves to do little jumps. He does that a lot. He's God. So Amazing fight sequence. This is too early to call something, but as they go out to start fighting on the scaffolding, and just this wonderful camera angle, static shots, by the way, do you notice that? Something a lot of amateur directors, and I'm going to say it that way because it is amateur, will do when it comes to an action scene is they'll have the camera doing this because they're trying to add action to the scene. And those directors are, and I already said this word, amateurs. If you have good action, the good action should speak and breathe in and of itself. You don't need to add to it with the camera. Now, you can have dynamic camera work. That's different. But shaky cam or too much movement or too many cuts, that's distracting. It pulls away from the action. But in this sequence, we see several long static shots of just, here, watch the fight for a few seconds. Or maybe a slow panning shot. Slow, emphasis, panning shot as the fighting is going on. It's some brilliant work. This is entirely too early to mention this because I've only watched this fight once and recency bias is a very real thing. But this might actually be pushing its way up to one of my favorite lightsaber fights in the franchise. No joke. This is really good. That's doubly funny to me because anybody who knows me knows that one of my favorite lightsaber fights in the entire franchise is also in Clone Wars. Can you name which one? And yeah, it's Palpatine versus Savage and Maul. I also happen to really, really like the big Maul lightsaber fight in Rebels. You know the one. I'm not going to spoil the specifics, but... Anywho. So, I love the clones. Real quick, just real quick competency. They're observant enough to notice the fight's going on. They're competent enough to respond immediately. And because they're there backing Ahsoka, she pulls a pretty solid win. You ever think about what would have happened if they hadn't gotten involved? I mean, you know, Maul probably would have died, among other things. And she probably would have still won the match. But because they were there, they're able to bring him in alive. Which is the goal all along. Clones doing what clones do best. And then Sam Witwer destroys his vocal cords for the best scene in the entire episode. And I think this is what pushes it into purple for me. This has been a fantastic episode, top to bottom. Let me go. Let me die. He's lost his one last chance at everything, his one last scrap of attempted victory. Well, he goes back to exactly where he was, doesn't he? And as he realizes they're taking him in alive, he starts to completely panic, starts to actually lose it. I wrote down the exact quote. You're all going to burn. We're all going to die. You don't know what you're doing. And as he raves like a lunatic, the water slowly closes over his head. And the episode ends. And yeah, once again, the worst possible thing here is that he's right. Someone mentioned, I think it was Blade Traval. Yeah, there it is. But Blade Traval said earlier, I'm having trouble thinking of something I've watched with a greater sense of tension than these episodes because we know what is happening now, what's going to happen, and there is simply nothing we can do about it. This is the great power of a truly good prequel or interquel. Playing with the fact that the audience knows is harder to do than it sounds. It can diminish the sequence. It can ruin the power of the original and the new thing. Like, you could screw over both things, right? But if you nail it, then the audience knowing, that adds to it. It adds to... I tell you right now, I'm probably going to enjoy episode 3 more after going through these episodes. And these episodes are absolutely enhanced by the fact of... I hate to keep using the word episode. I've called the Star Wars films episodes for so long. I'm not going to stop. Episode 3 adds to this, and these add to episode 3. This is... This is some stuff right here. I do think this is purple. I think this is our first purple episode of the Clone Wars Season 7. Yeah, Reach did the same thing. There's a game. Yeah, go ahead, Rex. I don't know when I'll have time, but, I can piecemeal it. This is, yeah, Lufia 2, another great example of this. Arguably Breath of Fire 3, although a lot of people didn't catch that. Yeah, this is powerful, and we've got 2 episodes left. And I'm not sure where they're going to go at this point. But I do know one thing. Without knowing, remember, I don't know what's coming. I haven't seen these episodes. There's only one direction this can be going in. And at this point, I am just staring at the bomb, waiting for it to go off. A bomb with 2 6s scrawled onto the side.